Hello, everyone. Art Burns here. Welcome back to the Showing Up to Your Life podcast and YouTube channel. I am really excited to be here with you today, as I am every day, and I'm excited to share something really special with you today. Now, everything that I talk about here, right, is really for one reason, right? It's for your well-being, right? Because it turns out that well-being is not some sort of passive, even accidental quality that we can achieve, okay? Well-being is actually a skill. And like any other skill, it is trainable. And so the practices that we talk about here, right? The just simple mindfulness practices of being present and paying attention to what's happening and doing so with a level of acceptance and letting go and allowing curiosity and compassion to drive our decisions and our actions. This is going to move you back into a place of well-being. And that's the whole point, right? Even though mindfulness and meditation are very cool and it's awesome to, tell people, yeah, I practice mindfulness, you're gonna look like the cool person at the party doing that for sure. But really my first priority here is for the well-being aspect of what we're talking about, right? To develop well-being, to enhance and develop the skill of well-being. All right, now there's actually this great talk that I've referenced a bunch of times here. The world-renowned neuroscientist Richie Davidson, right, talks about the 4 constituents of well-being. Okay, and there's one of these is what I want to talk to you about, but I'm just going to mention the other 3 real quick. So the 4 constituents of well-being are resilience, outlook, meaning a positive outlook, right? Being able to see the positive in people and situations and seeing the positive potential. Okay, you could look into positivity psychology for this kind of, this constituent of well-being. The third constituent of well-being is presence or attention. Really, it's really the attention, the ability to hold the focus of your attention on the present moment. There's been a study done that shows that 47%, the typical American, out of a study done of thousands of people, okay, a randomized study that turns up that showed this this study showed that 47% of the time of our waking hours are spent not paying attention to what we're doing, right? And so that's almost half the time, folks. That's so this is a really sort of low-hanging fruit there. The more that and it is very, very well shown in many studies that a wandering mind is an unhappy mind. So the more that we can train ourselves to pay attention to what it is that we're doing as we're doing it, obviously that 47% is going to shrink down to, even if it's halved, even if it comes down to just 20% of the time or 25% of the time that we're not paying attention to what we're doing. Think of how much happier and more well people are going to be, and think if you can even get higher than that, because you can, right? Through these simple practices, you can get that number down to near zero, right? And once it's at that point, then you're talking about, now you're cooking with gas, as they say, right? And so the 4th constituent of well-being, and this is the one we're going to talk about in depth today, is altruism or generosity. Right? Now, it is shown, okay, unambiguously, it is shown through brain scans, right, that there's circuitries in the brain which factor into one's well-being that are deeply and actually very quickly affected by practices of loving kindness and compassion, and just being more generous and more altruistic. Okay, so this is not, again, this is not a faith-based concept here. This is not a woo-woo concept. This is not a spiritual only concept that we're talking about. This is Richard Davidson is a hard-nosed neuroscientist, and he's done years and years and years of hard-nosed neuroscientific research. And so, I mean, the man has scanned probably, I don't know, maybe thousands of brains easily, so this is a very, very scientific approach and concept here. And so the idea is that if we can practice, and by the way, before I go any further, resilience, right, that first constituent of well-being, turns out that's the one that needs the most practice before it starts to change the circuitry in your brain and become something that's completely, automatic and physiologically different, right? That takes thousands of hours of practice. But the other three, right, training your attention, training your outlook, your positive outlook, which is the negativity bias that I talk about here a lot, and altruism. These three, and altruism is the fastest one, but all three of these can be done in very, very short periods of time, right? We're talking about, like 10 minutes a day of practice for, about a few weeks, and you're going to already start to see physical changes in the circuitry of the brain that is going to make you more well. Okay, so if we're talking about something that's that easy to attain, then why the heck wouldn't we, right? And so I'm going to talk to you today a little bit more about what generosity is. I'm going to give you a little challenge at the end of this video, and I hope you accept the challenge. It's going to be very moderate, very easy, but it's going to be an important challenge and something that can really impact you in a very deep way. Okay, so now, first of all, Richard Davidson is not the first person to talk about how much generosity and altruism are associated with well-being, right? This is something that's been known for a long, 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 long time. That compassion and the ability to think not of ourselves, right, but to think about others and to do so in kindness and generosity, right? This has been shown for a long, long time to be very beneficial to our well-being. Okay, plus it really feels good. It's one of those things that, like, a lot of these practices that I talk about, people, sometimes I go through, kind of explaining some of the practices that I'm going to have people do over the course of a few weeks, and they feel so overwhelmed. They're like, oh my gosh, it sounds so hard. But then I try to reassure them that, no, the practices feel so good. You're going to love doing them. I promise you. But seriously, I have so many clients who have done done simple practices of loving kindness and compassion training, and they have come back after just a few weeks, and just things have completely changed for them. All right, you're talking about relationships with others are deeper, but not just. I mean, that's sort of the obvious one, right? If you're thinking good thoughts about other people, then generally speaking, yes, you're going to be, a warmer and more tender and compassionate, relationship with others, right? But it's so much deeper than that, right? The other day I talked about forgiveness, right? And when we can get ourselves out of what we call the me-centered universe, right? We're not thinking about just what happens to me, right? And that's the way we live, right? Like when we're going through our lives, automatically, at least in an untrained mind, because remember, we're always practicing something, right? We're either practicing something that's going to contribute to our well-being, or we are inadvertently or unwittingly practicing those things which are going to pull us away from our well-being, okay? But one or the other you are practicing with every decision you make, every word you speak, every action you take, every thought that you entertain in your mind, meaning those thoughts that come in, you say, oh, wait, that's an interesting thought. Let me attach to that and see what happens there, okay? Every time we do one of these, all of these things, we are, again, either doing something that contributes to our well-being or detracts from our well-being, right? It's just like eating, right? There's a very common quote in nutrition, in the world of nutrition coaching, right? Is that everything you eat, you're either fighting a disease or contributing to a disease. Right? That's what it is, right? And so the same thing is true with the activity of the mind, right? And specifically the intention of the mind, right? The more, when we are doing things like paying attention right? Without judgment, when we are practicing generosity, when we are, kind of thinking about what could possibly go right today as opposed to what's definitely going to go wrong today, when we, practice, getting ourselves back to a place of calm, the resilience piece of that, right? To, when we become, aroused emotionally, right? To bring ourselves back down to a calm. Every time we do those things, we are contributing to our well-being, and that's why we practice in the work that I talk about here, right? That's why spending 10 minutes a day doing a meditation and then incorporating these little mini practices into our day, throughout our day, right? That don't add extra time. We're just, doing the things that we're already doing, the driving the car, the brushing the teeth, the washing clothes, the washing dishes, the cooking, the cleaning, all that stuff. If we can do that stuff with mindfulness, right? As I talk about here, and as I can certainly explain to you if you're not clear on it, the more we do that, right, the more we're practicing this kind of, we're developing a skill, and the skill is well-being. And that's how it works, folks, and that's the importance of doing these practices, right? And so again, what we normally practice is what we might call a me-centered universe, right? When we're living in a me-centered universe, right? And this happens in all kinds of areas of your life, right? Like, let's say you're driving down the road in your car, right? And everything's going fine. You're minding your own business. You're just in your lane. You're just driving along. All of a sudden, somebody cuts in front of you and just cuts you off. You have to slam on your brake, and you get frightened. Maybe some groceries spill on the floor of the car, and you're like, whoa, what the heck was that, right? What's the first thing that you think about, right? Do you think about, what that person might be going through? That they did this, that they cut in front of you and sped off and did whatever they did? No, generally speaking, what we think of is how this inconvenienced me, right? Like, my groceries are on the floor. This is about me here, and it's not about that person, right? That's how we generally speak. And of course, this is something that we're wired to do as part of our survival. We need to survive. So of course we need to focus on ourselves to some degree. However, the more we practice that, the more out of balance it becomes, right? We don't need to think only of ourselves. And just like we don't need to think only of other people, we need to have a balance. The balance is where we find that well-being, right? And the more we can, kind of get ourselves out of that. But before I get into that, there's other examples, right? Like, it's not just the obvious thing of of somebody cutting you off. Think even if your spouse gets or your partner, or, even a good friend, gets a job promotion, right? What's the first thing that comes into your mind? The first thing that comes into your mind is, well, how does that affect me? Right? Like, if it's a spouse, like, does this mean that my spouse is going to have to travel more? Does this mean that I'm going to have less time with my spouse? Does this mean I'm going to have more responsibilities with my children? Does this mean that that there's going to be more money for me to spend in the house now? What's in it for me? That's the first thing that's going to come to your mind, right? And while that seems natural and it seems logical, of course, right, that is not contributing to your well-being. It's not. What would contribute to your well-being is thinking, how wonderful this is for my spouse. This is amazing. What a great opportunity. I can't wait to hear all about it, right? That's where the well-being is. The well-being is not in focusing on what's happening with us, because not only is focusing on what's in it for us going to create a mind wandering aspect. And remember, a wandering mind is an unhappy mind, right? Like, that is very, very clear in so much research, right? So not only are we going to start wandering off to think about, okay, well, what does this mean? Does it mean more travel? Does it mean less time? Does it mean more stuff for me to do with the kids? Does it mean more money? What is it, right? Like when we do that, we're not here anymore, right? We're somewhere out there, right? And when we're out there, we're less happy. We're less well, right? That is not contributing to our well-being, right? So there's so many different circumstances, basically any circumstance of your life. If you really examine with open, curiosity, without judgment, and you examine the different, events that happen in your life, you'll find that almost every time you're thinking about how it affects you, right? And that's just natural. It's nothing to feel bad about. It's just natural. But again, because we've spent so many years doing this, we've practiced it and we've gotten really good at it. And unfortunately, in getting really good at this skill, we've ignored the skill of well-being. And again, this skill is not moving us towards well-being. This skill is moving us away from well-being. Okay? Now, there are many, many different studies, right? There's another fantastic TED Talk by a monk named Matthew Richard. Matthew Richard is one of the first people who came to the United States from Tibet as a monk through the Dalai Lama's assistance, and worked with Richard Davidson to have his brain scanned and to look at what compassion practices do in the circuitry of the brain. And what they found with Matthew Richard, and by the way, they once named him the happiest man on earth, right? Because of how off the charts activity was in the circuitry associated with happiness in his brain, right? Like that's how much this guy was practicing compassion and altruism and generosity, right? And so he talks about it in terms of, when we only consider feeling empathy for someone, right? Like this happens a lot with doctors and nurses and caregivers, especially in families who have a sick relative at home, that kind of thing. Something that is very, very prevalent in these situations is something called empathic distress fatigue, right? Which is to say that just thinking or just feeling someone's pain, and empathy really is feeling someone's pain within yourself, right? So just feeling that pain is actually something that in the brain you're working with the fear center of the brain, right? And the same part of the brain that creates the stress response, right? And that's what you're kind of the area of your brain that you're into when you're talking about empathy, right? But when we can flip empathy and create compassion, right? The intentional desire for well-being for others, right? What happens is we shift that activity from that area of our brain that causes stress, and it goes to the area that is associated with happiness. Okay? And specifically, what they've shown, what Matthew Richard, and I think I can call him doctor because he's a PhD as well as being a monk, but Dr. Richard says that that the area that, and he's not the only one, obviously this is lots of scientists who are involved with these studies, but the area of the brain associated with compassion is the same area that is activated when a mother is looking at her infant child, right? Like there is no end to the beautiful love that a mother can feel for her infant child, right? And that is the area of the brain that is active when we are practicing compassion, which again is simply having the intention for someone else's well-being, for the end of their suffering, right? And so now, again, this is such a low-hanging fruit, and not only does it contribute in the well-being that we talk about here, but as I discussed the other day, right, with forgiveness, right? Forgiveness is something, or the lack of forgiveness is something that is so detrimental to our physical, mental, and emotional health. Okay, really detrimental, right? I told you the story about the doctor in the burn unit in New Orleans, right? Who literally patients who were unwilling to express even the possibility of forgiving the person responsible for their injuries, right? They required 4 times the amount of skin grafts, because their body was rejecting it, than someone who was just willing to say, I might forgive this person someday. Right? And again, even if they were still pressing charges on the person, right, or suing them or whatever, right? So they were, so it wasn't like they had to like roll over and put up a white flag and say, oh well, I guess my life is screwed and this person gets, no, like literally the justice system was in full force, but just believing that you could forgive this person, having like letting that into your heart is enough to change the physical nature of your body so that your body will accept a surgical procedure more than it would otherwise. I mean, this is amazing, folks, And so when we consider, practicing something that is so beneficial to us but also beneficial to others, I mean, this is the true win-win here. This, it doesn't get any better than this. That's why compassion practices are my very favorite practices. When I work with clients, most clients are coming to me with absolutely, almost no experience in meditation. Some of them have a little bit, but most have none, right? And so the first couple of weeks is spent on really doing the basic, nuts and bolts and explaining how meditation works and explaining how we let go of the thoughts and we return our attention, addressing that wandering mind, that third constituent that Richard Davidson was talking about. I don't think they're in order in any way, but that's the third one that he named. But anyway, I spend like the first 2, 3, maybe 4 weeks talking about, just basic mindfulness and meditation practices, and I coach people on those and make sure I'm making it nice and easy for them to do the practices and getting them kind of over that hump and getting into the habit of doing the practices. But then in like week 5 or 4 or maybe 6, depending on the person, I get into the compassion practices, and that is always my very favorite time of my coaching program. It always is. I get tingles even just now thinking that, like, I have a client this morning who I just started going over the compassion practices, and I am so excited for him and also for his whole family, because compassion is the thing that, if you look at the different constituents that Dr. Davidson was talking about. So resilience, outlook, and attention are all things that are internally, about the well-being, right? Like, it's really focused internally. But when you get to compassion and altruism, generosity, that's when we pour it out of ourselves and we bring it out to the rest of the world. And that, when we start to do that, I mean, the relationship changes are just unbelievable. I mean, I don't know what the number is, but I would say if I really started to count it up, I would say I got dozens of clients who have reported after doing compassion practices, they have all reported that they have better relationships with, either coworkers, employers, or supervisors with whom they always had really deep problems. Like, they went from people who were like, that son of a, like, like really like almost like quitting, like wanting to quit a job because of the people that they had to work with, right? And inside of 3 or 4 weeks, all of a sudden they're like, you know what? I realized that all this time this person was hurting me. It's because they're in pain. And now I feel for them. And now I don't have any of this animosity anymore. And now, guess what I have? I have well-being. And I have well-being all day long at work. And I love it. And this is what I hear time and time and time again. All right, so now I'm going to give you a very simple practice to do, and this is the time of year to do this anyway, right? This is the time of year where it's all about connecting to others, connecting to our families, connecting to the greater good, right? This is when we make donations. This is when we want to buy gifts for others. We want to do things for others, right? So this is going to fit perfectly for this time of year, and I want you to do this so badly. I'm begging you to try this practice. Okay, super simple. Okay, what I want you to do is I want you to, in the morning, okay, before you get going to work, and weave it into your morning routine, right? So maybe just before you brush your teeth, or maybe if you do exercise, like just after you do your exercise, or just before, just carve out 10 seconds of your morning routine. And I want you to set the intention that you are going to do X number of kind and generous acts today. Now, I would suggest that if you want to do this the really fun way, okay, you start tomorrow with 1, or today, you start with 1. And then the next day it's 2, and then the next day it's 3, the next day it's 4, the next day it's 5, so on and so on till the end of the month. So at that point you would be at oh gosh, I'm not going to do this math. I don't want to embarrass myself, but you can do the math. But don't feel like you have to do that many, right? I mean, you're going to be up to like 20 or 30 at the end of the month, so it's going to be a lot. So don't feel like the pressure to do that. But maybe you want to start with 1 for a couple days, and then maybe do 2 for a few more days. Maybe get yourself up to like 10 things in a given day, okay? And so, and what you're going to do is you're going to just very, very simply just do 1 or however many is that day, just simple, kind acts for others, okay? Now, and I'm talking about really simple, okay? It could be as simple as a heartfelt thank you to somebody. But when you're doing a heartfelt thank you, what you want to do is you want to like really, stop, don't just be like, oh, thanks, while you're typing something away, or hey, by the way, thanks a lot, see you later, that kind of thing. No, like make eye contact and look into somebody, and or if it's writing an email to them, like really sit with it and feel the gratitude that you have for this person, okay, and then express that to them. All right. It could also be just holding the door for someone, right? It could. I know most of us aren't going to work these days, but if you are, it could be like just holding the doors, holding the elevator for someone. If you see somebody carrying something that looks cumbersome, offer a hand, right? If even reaching out to a colleague and saying, hey, is there anything I can do to help you with your workload? Or would you just like to talk about it, or just recognize, like that is an altruistic act in and of itself, just to tell someone like, hey, I just want you to know that I see how hard you're working right now, and it looks like you're going through a pretty tough time. I just want you to know that I see it, right? That can be one of your acts. Okay, simple things. Now you could bring it larger too if you want. I mean, listen, if if you have the resources and the capabilities, buy gifts for kids who can't afford it for Christmas. Donate to people. Really hand money to somebody on the street who looks like they're having a hard time. Buy somebody's groceries at a grocery store or at a drive-through. Pick up the tab for the car behind you. Pay somebody's toll behind you. And again, that's if you have the resources. You don't have to do that though, right? It doesn't have to be a money thing. It can just be as simple as the energy of just smiling at someone, right? But intentionally doing it as a thing of altruism, right? Not smiling just because it feels good to me to smile, right? But smiling because someone else seeing you smile, it's going to feel good to them, right? And that's what I mean, saying like, yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for your work. Thank you for doing that for me. Or maybe you have a colleague, if you are working in the office, maybe, hey, I'm going over the coffee machine. Can I get you a cup of coffee? Maybe at home, make coffee for your spouse in the morning. Right? Offer to do something around the house that you wouldn't normally do. Offer to take on one of the tasks, one of the chores of your spouse or your partner. There's millions, literally millions of opportunities that we have to express and perform a generous, altruistic, compassionate act. And so what I want you to do is I want you to look for those opportunities. And again, if you want to have fun with it, it's 1 today, 2 tomorrow, 3 the next day, 4 the next day, 5 the next day, so you're going to be up to like, 20 something by the end, which is great. And it definitely is doable if you're into it, but don't feel like you have to, right? This is not a thing where it's supposed to be strenuous and hard for you. It's supposed to feel good, right? So even if you just keep it at one thing every day for the rest of this month, then just do that. Okay, but it's a 2-step process. Remember, set the intention in the morning, and this is important, right? Set the intention in the morning, and then throughout the day, do that many things, right? Now, here's the thing. If you do it the way that I'm describing, the 1 today, 2 tomorrow, 3 the next day, 4 the next day, 5 the next day, even if you do 10 per day, right? Even if you get up to 10 and just level off there, by the time New Year's comes around, today's December 3rd or 4th, by the time New Year's comes around, you're going to already, if they did a brain scan between right now and on January 1st, you would already be showing signs of a difference in your physical the circuitry of your brains, the neural circuitry of your brains. So literally, that's how fast it happens. All right. And if you would like some more practices, I have some really great other sort of meditation practices. Very, very simple. Okay. Very, very simple. Takes, 3 or 4 minutes a day. And if you want to learn about some of these practices, they are equally as effective, and if not more so. And if you do both of these things, then I know by January 1st, you're going to start seeing real differences in your life. Now, of course, then the idea is don't stop on January 1st, right? Keep going. Keep going. And I promise you that if you do this, you are going to feel the well-being before you know it, and it's going to be amazing. All right, folks. Well, another piece of altruism you could do is to do all the YouTube things for me. Okay, like, subscribe, share, and comment. Okay, if you're up for it. And if you're listening to us on the podcast, you can just rate and review, right, wherever you're listening to. Give me a rating that you feel is fair, and maybe a couple of words about what you think about this podcast. This will get more people to, and so you're not just helping me, you're helping a lot of other people, right? Because the more of that stuff that happens, the more of the YouTube things and the podcast things that happen, the likes, the subscribes, the comments, the rate and review and all that, right? What it does is it affects the algorithm. It gets my videos in front of more people. Right? And that means that there are more people who are going to see these messages and will get these free practices and will find their own well-being. So you are doing an enormously generous act of altruism just by doing that. And that is going to contribute to your well-being. So do it. Why not? Right? And of course, if you want to support me, Patreon is up and running. So please head over there. It's Patreon Art Burns Coaching, I think. If you need the link, you email me. I'll send it to you. Yeah, folks, I'm so happy for you, because if you do these practices, you're going to feel it, and you're going to realize the tremendous benefits that I've learned for years now, that people have been doing for 2,500 years. So it's like, there's no mystery to how these things work. So try it out. Let me know what you think. And if you would like those other practices, hit me up and I'll give them to you. Okay, super easy practice. All right, and it'll be free because of altruism, right? All right, everybody, have a great day. I wish you well. Take care.